I'm Keely Mary and welcome to my channel. Today I have finally decided to sit down and share my revert story. This is something that I kind of put off for a little bit when I first started my channel, like a couple of months ago, because it is obviously very personal, but now I finally felt comfortable to share this. So I think I'm just going to start from childhood because I think that's important to be able to get the full picture, to be able to understand like my upbringing and things like that. Because obviously religion is a very big part of life, and I feel like that's a big part of anybody's life. So I feel like in order to get the full picture, I should just start at childhood. I was born and raised in a very small conservative town in Canada. I didn't really grow up with a lot of different types of people. I was mostly surrounded by white Christians and atheists. So that's kind of what I knew growing up, was Christianity and atheism. And I really didn't even know what atheism was until I was probably like in grade 9. Like I didn't even know what that was. I just didn't really have a lot of diversity around me. I didn't really know a whole lot of different people. But I was raised Christian. It wasn't like an overly religious upbringing, but it was kind of like you go to church every Sunday sort of thing. And I feel like a lot of other Christian kids, I had so many questions about Christianity and how the religion worked. So one thing that I was always quite confused with was the Trinity. I remember even asking my mom if Jesus was God. I remember my mom explaining to me that at the time, obviously, that we believed that Jesus was the Son of God, which obviously I don't believe in anymore. I just found that quite confusing. And I want to clarify that I mean no disrespect to anybody. You can believe what you want to believe in. That's perfectly fine. I'm not judging anybody for that. I'm not criticizing anybody for that. You can believe in what you want to believe in, and I respect your decision. But personally for me, like growing up, I just had a lot of questions about Christianity, and it just wasn't, I guess it just wasn't for me. And then I also went through confirmation when I think I was like 13 or 14. That's basically where you like reaffirm your faith. You go to classes like once a week, and you basically relearn Christianity, kind of get like baptized again. So I went through that, and one thing that really stuck out to me through confirmation was that one of my confirmation teachers actually was very honest with us and said that there are parts of the Bible that are false and we don't know what parts that is, because she kind of explained that it was like a game of telephone where it was passed down for many years before it was written down. There wasn't really much preservation, so that's just what I was told. Honestly, I was very grateful for the honesty. And now when I reached the point of adolescence, probably when I was about like 15, 16, maybe around there, I really started to question religion. I think like for most kids, it was a very angsty time in my life, and I started to think about things a lot more deeply. I think this is a point in any person's life when you start to think about certain topics like existence and what happens when you go, basically. And so that was deeply unsettling. Like I think it would be for most people. It was sort of like a little bit of an existential crisis in a way. And also at this point I was surrounded by a lot of atheists, and so I think that really made me start questioning my own religion, and it made me start to think like, how do I know that this religion is the true religion when there's so many other religions out there and I've never really looked into any of them? And so this is kind of a confusing point in my life where I was really just searching different religions and trying to figure out which one I believed in, which one I agreed with. So I kind of flipped between agnosticism and believing in God. It was a very confusing time. It's hard for me to even keep it straight in my head, like what was going on. So I would look into different religions, but obviously I didn't look into all of them. I think there's so many religions out there, I don't know if that's even possible. But I would look into like paganism, Wicca, like spirituality, Buddhism, Hinduism, things like that, because I thought I was looking for something that was so different from what I initially believed in. So I kind of started out with probably the least similar. And so I was searching for a very long time. I never really found anything that stuck, and I think I did learn a lot. So I think I learned a lot of valuable things about different people and different people's beliefs. So I think I did come out with some valuable lessons, but none of these really stuck out to me. I never really practiced any of these religions. I was just sort of learning. And I will say too that the entire time, like regardless of what point I was in my life, I would still pray all the time. At certain points I would pray to God, at other times I would pray to some sort of unknown higher power. Other times I would pray to the universe. It just kind of depended on where my mindset was at and what I was kind of looking into at the moment, I guess. And at this point, I never really looked into Islam or Judaism or any kind of like Abrahamic faith. And so while at this point in my life, I wasn't ever surrounded by any Muslims and I didn't really know much about Islam, all I knew was that Muslims believe in the same God that Christians believe in, and I just kind of thought I was looking for something so wildly different than what I had grown up knowing. So I didn't even really give it a chance. I didn't look into it. I didn't really understand what was meant by Muslims believe in the same God as Christians. And so I kind of just left it at that. One thing that I find interesting though, looking back on, is that I was very anti-Islamophobia. Like, I didn't know much about Islam, but I was very much against Islamophobia. I would always immediately shut down any type of Islamophobia, and I would get really upset when people were Islamophobic. And so there were other types of discrimination that I was obviously always against, but for some reason Islamophobia was one that I was just very passionate about, and I don't really know why. I always knew that Muslims were not people to be afraid of. I was always confused whenever people would be saying how scary Muslims were or talking negatively about Muslims for some reason. And I was always quite aware of a lot of the propaganda that was spread by the media, very anti-Muslim propaganda, I guess you could say. So yeah, I would always just question why adults were saying that Muslims are so scary or that these certain people are just inherently bad. Like, I always questioned why this one group of people is bad and we're good. I never really understood why people talked like that or why people thought like that. But obviously once I reached adolescence and was a teenager, I was able to kind of think a little bit more critically about this. Now, once I went away to university to a different city, I was surrounded by so many different people of different ethnicities, different cultures, different religions, and I actually ended up meeting my husband through a group of mutual friends that we had at the time. And so we would often get into conversations about religion a lot. So at the time, I was in a very agnostic mindset when I met my husband, and not really having philosophy of science taught to me, because I feel like that's very important, and I never learned that until quite a bit later in my education when, interestingly enough, I was actually doing a liberal arts class. I think this is a problem that I kind of ran into in thinking that science was an absolute truth, and I learned much later that science doesn't provide absolute truth, and it is fallible because it's done by humans, obviously, and science is basically just a way of learning about the world around you, and it doesn't provide absolute truth. So I was very much committing something called scientism, where it was almost like taking science as a religion, and I think a lot of people run into this, and a lot of science students run into this as well, and I was no exception. So anyways, when me and my husband first met, we would talk about religion a lot, and I feel like I had a lot of questions. I wouldn't really necessarily call it like debating, but I think I would have a lot of questions about science specifically and asking about what Islam said about it. And I feel like I was very much obviously in the mindset of scientism, so I was kind of coming at religion from that point of view. And so eventually, through us talking and kind of debating about religion, I eventually started to believe in God again. So how I knew God was obviously through Christianity, so I just kind of went back to Christianity because that's what I knew. And I started studying Christianity again, I started reading the Bible, but I did still have questions, but I was still Christian, I just had questions. And so then we got engaged, and before we wanted to get married, I wanted to learn more about Islam, and so he would show me videos and answer questions that I had, but there were some things that he obviously didn't know how to answer, or he just was worried about wording things in the wrong way, especially because English isn't his native language, and so sometimes he didn't know some of the words for certain religious terms. So he offered to take me to the mosque when there was a class running for reverts, so I ended up going, and the class was actually canceled on the day that I went, but there were a few reverts who were there who thought that the class was still on for some reason. And so I ended up talking to this lady, and so this lady had been Muslim for, I don't know, maybe like 15 or 20 years, I can't remember exactly, and she was a white Canadian lady. This is the first time that I actually ever met a revert or a Muslim that was white, so for me that was actually like a really interesting experience, and it showed me that, you know, that there are white people who are Muslim when the only Muslims that I ever saw were not white. So yeah, I was talking to this lady, she was showing me the basics of Islam, about the pillars. She also grabbed me some pamphlets, so she got me a pamphlet, I think on the pillars of Islam, and then I think there was another pamphlet on sort of the scientific evidence for Islam. That one was actually a really important one for me, because before then it was hard to kind of figure out how science and religion can kind of coexist. And she also wrote down on a paper different YouTube channels to check out and YouTube videos, and she also took me to the prayer area, and I was able to watch people pray and see how they prayed kind of in a congregation, and so that was really interesting to me to see that for the first time. So when I went home, I did eventually look into some of these videos, and the first video that I watched was actually very eye-opening. It was this man talking about his revert story, and a lot of the things in his early life really resonated with me. There were a lot of questions that I had, and he showed how Islam can answer some of the questions that Christians have about Christianity. And so that was really interesting to me, especially about Jesus, peace be upon him. So I learned about Jesus, peace be upon him, in Islam and how that differentiates from Christianity, and it started to actually make a lot more sense to me. And so I started thinking about Islam a little bit more, and so I was kind of looking into it a little bit, but I didn't really go too deep into it at this point. It was just something that I thought was interesting. I was kind of considering it, but I hadn't done enough research at this point yet. So then me and my husband ended up getting married. I was still Christian at the time, and he was obviously Muslim, and then so we would sometimes talk about religion still, and I wanted to look more into Islam after we got married. And so the more that I looked into it, the more I started to realize that this kind of aligns with my personal belief. It was something that I was starting to agree with. And so I would always watch videos, I would read free resources that I found online, because I was an avid reader through most of my life. Reading really did help me, because I was able to read a lot of books on the topic, and so I would read things like the Clear Quran, which was recommended to me. And at first it was just I was just trying to understand. Every little bit that I would learn, I would want to know more, and so I would keep searching more and more about Islam just to find out what Islam says on certain things. And I would watch debates, I would watch lectures, I would watch just different things to try to learn more. And I was very fascinated specifically with stories of the prophets, peace be upon them, because I liked to hear the differences between Islam and Christianity. And I think because I've always been somebody who's been so curious about the world around me, and I think this wanting to learn more about different people and cultures and religions, and I think this is something that honestly everyone has to a certain degree. So I think that really helped me. And it's kind of funny because I was talking to my husband recently, and I was reminded of how I used to kind of hide my learning. Like, not really hide it, I wasn't really trying to hide it from him, but it was something that I kind of wanted to do on my own. And so I would be like on my phone reading something or watching something, and my husband would kind of, I guess, notice that I was looking into this but kind of trying to hide it a little bit at the same time. So I would like wait till he would like go to work, and I would like watch these videos and things like that. But obviously, like when I was around him too, I would kind of like be researching and like kind of like hiding it. Yeah, it's just funny that he kind of like knew this the whole time. But then there would be points when he would go to work and I would find something that was just so fascinating, and I would just start texting him. Like, I couldn't hide it anymore, so I would just text him and be like, did you know this? Like, this is so cool. And so we would just have a discussion like over text, like when he was at work, and I would be asking him questions and things like that. And so probably like 2 to 3 months into researching, I decided that I wanted to convert to Islam. I decided that this was what I really wanted. So I told my husband that, and I made the decision that I would be fasting that year during Ramadan. So I did. And the decision initially was that I was going to convert right after Ramadan. But that didn't really happen because of a number of things, honestly. It's kind of hard to describe this or to talk about this, but I feel like part of it was that I wanted to wear the hijab. Like, I decided, because once I learned about the reasons for wearing hijab in Islam, I decided that that's what I wanted to wear, but I wanted to be able to wear it immediately, and I think that was kind of my mistake. And so part of it was that I was nervous, because obviously if I'm wearing hijab, I have to kind of tell people that I'm Muslim. I'm very clearly Muslim if I'm wearing a hijab. So I was kind of nervous in that way, because while I didn't think most people in my life would react negatively, there's always that like 0.01% chance that they will. And another reason why I was kind of slow to convert was because I was worried that I wasn't good enough. Like, I wanted to know how to pray 5 times a day and be able to do that 5 times a day. And I wanted to know more, and I wanted to just be an overall better person. And I think I was worried that I wouldn't be good enough to wear the hijab or to be Muslim when really, you can be Muslim and still be imperfect. You don't have to be perfect at everything. Nobody's perfect at everything. That's just how we are. Like, as humans, we're not perfect. I think it took me like 2 years to actually convert once I decided that I wanted to. So by the time I did convert, I was able to know how to pray, and I put on the hijab pretty much immediately after converting. And so I was really worried the entire time, like the whole 2 years that I waited to convert. I was very concerned the whole time about the deeds that I was doing, like fasting and things like that. I was very concerned that maybe they wouldn't count, and I was obviously very concerned that, you know, anything can happen at any time, and I didn't want to leave this world as a non-Muslim. So that was always something that was in the back of my head while I was waiting so long to convert. Yeah, so 2 years after wanting to be Muslim, after deciding that I wanted to be Muslim, I finally took my Shahada. Yeah, it was just a really incredible moment for me. I was really happy. I think I like almost started crying, but at the same time, I didn't really feel different, obviously, but I don't know why, but I expected to kind of like feel different, to feel like all of a sudden like, oh, I'm a Muslim, but I didn't really have that feeling. And I think maybe because I had the beliefs already, like I already believed in Islam, like I didn't really feel like there was any starting point like, okay, I'm non-Muslim, now I'm Muslim. So I think that's where I'm going to stop this. I think that's all that I really have to share at the moment. So I have been Muslim for, I believe, 2 years now. I'm excited to maybe share more of my experiences with you. And I also want to give a thank you for reaching 500 subscribers. Thank you to anybody who subscribed, commented, liked, or even just watched any of my videos. It is very motivating, honestly, and I am very excited to share more of my journey with you. If anybody has any questions or any topics that you would like me to go into, please comment down below, but please keep in mind that I'm limited by my own experiences and I can only talk about my own experiences. Thank you all for watching, and please like and subscribe if you would like to see